should investors think about this? Because there are some names, for instance, in the group, like a Micron or a Qualcomm, which get more than 50% of revenues, direct exposure from China.
Right.
Do you stay away from names like that?
We're not looking at it that way. And, for one, obviously, the issues around trade are very difficult to predict. 1 month we're good, 1 month we're bad. So, we're not ignoring the risk, but we're sort of putting it aside because it's unpredictable. In terms of, how semiconductors are going to react to this, I think it's going to be very much in line with the overall economy right now. If the trade issues impact GDP, it's going to impact semis, it's going to impact everything else, everything that our components go into. But we started getting warmer on the group in the summer, not because of the trade issues, but because we've already been starting to dial this in for over a year. And we started to see, this slowdown in my group, well more than a year ago. And we're working through the system with some of the things that, specifically would cause semiconductors to underperform, such as inventory levels and getting the estimates down. So if the trade issues do get resolved, we think it's unquestionably good for the group. And even if they don't right now, and we just kind of get to steady state, there's still some secular drivers we think which can move the group forward as we go into next year.
Chips go into stuff, into electronics. And so who has the power? I mean, if, for instance, an Apple supplier, a bunch of Apple suppliers supply chips to the iPhone or whatnot, right, and Apple's subject to tariffs, they're probably not going to pay it. They're going to squeeze their suppliers. So right, which ones have the most power in your view? Well,
even on that, and that's, a commonly held belief, but, Apple, for example, they squeeze their suppliers every day. And I think if you talk to someone in Apple's purchasing department, they would say, if they weren't squeezing their suppliers as much as they could today, they'd be leaving money on the table. So, what I would worry about if tariffs came on and it caused Apple to have to raise the price of iPhones, and, they've been non-committal about what would happen if tariffs did happen. Well, it would just lower unit demand, and then what you'd have is lowered unit demand for semiconductors and everything else.
Aren't Chinese manufacturers moving away from dependence on American product?
Well, to the extent that they can, and Huawei
has, right?
Well, they have had no choice,
right?
In some cases, and in those cases where they do move away from U.S. Manufacturers, their performance is going to suffer. In some
because the replacements just aren't as good.
Well, if they could move to a Chinese source that was just as good and just as cheap, they would have done it regardless of the trade situation. So I think what they're doing now is out of necessity. But, I think if this were to continue and that become permanent, it would affect the quality of what they sell.
Semiconductors are a very, very cyclical sector. And so you look at them as sort of a barometer or maybe a forecaster of what's to come in the economy. To the extent that tariffs could have a drag on the economy, even if there's not a direct impact on your group, as you say,
right,
necessarily, does that cause you to rethink EPS estimates and price targets, et cetera?
Well, I mean, think of this. In terms of a leading indicator, semis were the first to roll over in 2018 as an indicator of what was going to happen. They're having a bad day today. We're only a couple points off their all-time high. So, the extent that, semis actually have been leading the market and probably telling you that semiconductor investors have been looking past this, although not today.